When I watched this film for the first time, it just blew me away. But after a while, I asked myself, wait, was it pro or anti-revolution? And I watched it again. This time, I was a bit more critical and conscious. And I found out that it's pure entertainment. No doubt it's a total banger. But politically, it's kind of a mess. Actually, it's a propaganda film that's against the revolution, wrapped in revolutionary packaging. I have solid proof and a lot to say. Watch this complete review. This is Bob. Everyone calls him Pat. He's a revolutionary. He belongs to a group called the French 75, a group that fights for change, for revolution. In this group, there's a girl named Perfidia. Bob loves her madly. They fight together. They rob banks together. They believe those banks hold the money stolen from the poor by the rich. One night, everything changes. Perfidia clashes with a man named Lockjaw, a soldier who wants control over everyone. She humiliates him, and now he wants revenge. One day, he catches her. Something shocking happens between them. Not long after, Perfidia and Bob have a daughter. They name her Willa. The French 75 plan another robbery. But this time, Perfidia is injured and caught by the police. Lockjaw visits her in the hospital. She's helpless and asks him for help. He demands the names and hiding places of her comrades. She agrees and she's freed. The police launch a brutal crackdown on the French 75, killing many members. Guilt consumes Perfidia. She runs from Lockjaw and disappears. The survivors of the French 75 go underground, living in hiding for years. Willa, Bob and Perfidia's daughter, grows into a teenager. She's in college now. Meanwhile, the state begins a new operation against immigrants. Lockjaw leads it, using the chance to search for Perfidia and her daughter. At last, he finds her. He hands her over to a smuggler who traffics people across the border. Does she fight her way out? Does Bob save her? Does Perfidia ever return? You'll find those answers only in the film. There are some moments in the film that are confusing or not clearly stated, and there are many nuances. Let's cover those. That scene in the detention center is messy. Did Lockjaw rape her? Did she use sex as a weapon? Did she rape him like he later claims? Or was it consensual? The truth is, it's all blurry, and that's the point. It's about power, humiliation, and survival. Lockjaw's later version is self-serving. He paints himself as the victim, but what we saw was something much uglier. Two broken people clashing in the worst way. Both Perfidia and Lockjaw are shown as lustful, destructive forces in that scene. Both can't control their sexual urges. Both love domination, humiliation sort of sex. Perfidia's betrayal. She sells out the French 75. Was it cowardice or survival? Maybe both. She wasn't just a traitor. She was a woman cornered. Maybe she ran out of guilt. But when she vanishes, she leaves not just Bob, but her daughter to carry her ghost. And that makes her a narcissist who doesn't care about anyone in the name of individual freedom. As shown in the earlier scene with Bob, she goes out for the revolution, leaving Bob and her newborn daughter behind. Before leaving, she talks about individual freedom and how Bob was restricting it. Although in the end, Bob gives Willa a letter written by Perfidia. In this letter, she regrets not being together with her family. But this change in her character is not progressive. Rather, it's a conservative one. She values her family life now only after failing in her revolutionary struggle. But the world outside is still ugly and needs to be transformed more than ever. Actually, her regret and her telling Willa to continue fighting to change the world paves the way for an ending with a very particular message. And that message is, don't try to overthrow the system by force. Fight it through peaceful protest instead. That car ride at the end, it's everything. Willa refuses to hide. She chooses a protest. Is it a peaceful protest or something like a serious anti-state one? It is left to the audience's subjective interpretation. Though, apparently, it is left for you to interpret it, but actually the previous story leads you to form this conclusion, that Willa chose a so-called peaceful, democratic, political resistance. And Bob, learning to use the mobile for the first time, finally gets the quiet, simple life he always wanted with his daughter. He tries to reconnect with the modern world. The story says battles never end. They just pass to the next generation. And it also says the next generation learns from the past, fighting smarter. Willa joins a peaceful protest rather than taking up arms and looting banks. So the ending says two things. nothing has changed. The younger generation still has to fight state repression, but they fight differently, maybe more maturely. Was Willa's way really mature? I'll talk about that in the political part of this review. Yes and no. It's complicated. Biologically, she was Lockjaw's daughter, as proven in the scene where he conducts the DNA test. But socially, in every real sense, Bob was her father. He raised her, and she accepted him as her real dad. There's a dialogue in the DNA test scene where Willa says, "It doesn't matter what the test says. I have a father, and it's not you." That says it all. Lockjaw wasn't shown as a conventional, emotionless villain. His character had different shades. Actually, this film didn't have a hero or a villain. It was a story with layered characters. Lockjaw's relationship with Perfidia and Willa isn't a simple dark one. He didn't rape Perfidia as a typical villain would. His character, like many others, was consciously kept blurry by Paul Thomas Anderson. So in many situations, the room is open for subjective interpretation by the viewer. For example, when he raids Bob's house after 16 years and sees a picture of Willa hanging on the wall, he removes it and brings it close to his face. It suggests many possibilities. He could be smelling it to remember Perfidia, feeling a twisted sense of ownership over Willa, or maybe feeling a momentary flash of love for Perfidia. But the evolution of Lockjaw's descent into darkness wasn't shown. His vulnerabilities were yes, but his transformation wasn't. And of course, it wasn't a story about Lockjaw either. From start to finish, he's essentially the same. Despite all the shades, his overall vibe is villainous. Dark, greedy for power, and madly obsessed. That darkest side becomes most visible when he joins the Christmas Adventurers Club, a far-right, elitist fraternity turned political network. I think he's the most comical protagonist ever in a political film. One might even wonder if he's really the protagonist or just the narrator of the story. He doesn't have a single prominent heroic act in the entire film. Then I heard Paul Thomas Anderson himself say in an interview, his heroic moment is in the 16 years, of raising her off camera. Heroism of raising her. We don't get to see that part. And DiCaprio said this about his character. I just love the way Paul introduces this family dynamic. One sort of washed up revolutionary that is kind of a hip neck, as we would call it. I realized it's hip necks, hippies that are also rednecks. It's get off my property, but I'm also woke. That's Bob, and the fact that he's trying to connect with his daughter and there's this generational disconnect. That's what it's about. I have a lot to say about his character, but that's for the political commentary later. Overall, I like the idea of a grey protagonist, not a black and white hero. But in trying to make him grey, Bob ends up being the most irrelevant character in the film. There are so many moments where you think, what is he even doing here? Maybe that's because of the filmmaker's political motivations, trying so hard to create characters with shades that they made them the most extreme and hollow instead. Johnny Greenwood's score isn't just background noise. It makes you feel like something terrible or amazing is always about to happen. Especially that dramatic piece in the final chase sequence. Oh my god, that was out of this world. The mix of racing car sounds with the background score, waves, roads, chaos, it all came together perfectly. Overall, it was quite good, though not legendary. My favorite was The River of Hills, playing in the background of that chase sequence. Shot on 35mm VistaVision by Michael Bauman, one battle after another feels raw and real. Nothing feels polished. Everything feels alive. The camera never just shows, it reacts, like it's part of the fight. And it gives the actors space to create magic. The camera doesn't overshadow them. Truly unique work. Everything, location, acting, camera, BGM was perfect. It was made for the big screen, a real treat for cinema lovers. The moment everything breaks open, Willa comes face to face with Lockjaw inside an old, half-lit chapel, the place where the truth finally comes out. Dust fills the air and a single beam of light cuts through it. The camera stays still, like it's holding its breath. The tall pillars make it feel more like a courtroom than a fight. Willa refuses to accept the truth, that she's Lockjaw's daughter. It's shot simply, but it hits deep. Perfect location, masterful cinematography. I've watched a couple of Paul Thomas Anderson's films. To be honest, I didn't like them at all. But this one was engaging and entertaining. I loved his work here, except for the political side of it. Leonardo DiCaprio as Bob. Brilliant, paranoid, exhausted, desperate. Teyana Taylor as Perfidia, fierce and unforgettable. Even when she's gone, you feel her shadow. Sean Penn as Lockjaw, chilling, obsessed, pathetic, terrifying all at once. Chase Infinity as Willa, the surprise. She's the soul of the movie by the end, and she carries it like she's been acting for decades. Benicio del Toro as Sergio, calm but dangerous, worn down, wise, and a little haunted. Apparently, this film supports revolution, but look closer, it doesn't. It actually hates the revolution and the revolutionaries. Let's start from the ending. Willa chooses peaceful protest, peaceful political resistance, in contrast to her parents' radical, armed struggle. Throughout the film, the armed struggle is mocked, shown as childish and mad. The opening scene, for example, the revolutionaries free migrants, but instead of focusing on courage or injustice, it zooms in on Lockjaw's lust and Perfidia's desire. When French 75 robbed the bank, Perfidia is shown as a careless, mad girl who kills someone accidentally. The impression is that revolutionaries are reckless fools with no real cause and sensibility. And then there's Bob, used as the ultimate anti-revolutionary tool. He's shown as weak and foolish. His only heroic moment, according to PTA, happens off-camera. PTA in one of his interviews said this about Bob's character. His heroic moment is in the 16 years, of raising Willa off-camera. Heroism of raising her. We don't get to see that part. Actually, it was intentional of the filmmakers to not give Bob a single heroic moment. There are multiple reasons behind it. DiCaprio is a star followed by millions of people. It was a mainstream commercial film, so DiCaprio had to serve the core theme and ideology behind the film, which is liberalism. So the fundamental aim of the film was to mock the idea of a revolution. Thus, DiCaprio's heroism was sacrificed for liberalism. Let's examine PTA's comments on Bob's character a little more. If, according to PTA, Bob's heroism was in the 16 years of raising Willa because he was a family man, then at least he should have been given a single chance to prove that. Was there any space for that in the film? Yes, there was. In many moments. Let's take one very important moment out of the many. In the final chase of Willa, Bob could have saved her. He had the logical chance there. But instead, Willa kills Tim Smith, one of the agents sent by the Christmas Adventurers Club. And Bob is shown like a stupid fuck who is trying to save his daughter with a signal device in his hands to reach her. And he ends up standing like a useless man in front of his daughter. By the way, that signal device also doesn't work. Again showing the weakness of the revolutionaries. It works for other revolutionaries, but not for Bob for some strange reason. By the way, that scene was awesome. I loved it. I agree it had to be shot like that. The problem isn't in that scene alone. The problem is in the way Bob's character was written altogether. Benicio del Toro as Sergio was the only revolutionary character with serious strength. But he too was given very little screen time, though he left an impact in that small space of screen time. He was shown as a leader of the undocumented community and a fighter for immigrant rights. But here too, those immigrants were shown as street smart folks who knew how to get things done. That is fairly logical. But the problem here is, it gives the impression that the immigrants are smart enough to get caught or punished. In fact, one feels as if illegal immigrants enjoy teasing the government. The way they play hide and seek with the authorities. In one scene, a nurse at the hospital helps Bob escape. This clearly gives the impression that illegal immigrants are deeply rooted in the system and are influential to some extent. The way this problem was shot in the film, it neither truly depicts the problem nor highlights it. And it doesn't create sympathy for illegal immigrants either. Now, as far as armed struggle is concerned, I'm not against mocking it as far as the story of the film is concerned. But it had to be logical. If you want to mock them, you have to show their revolutionary side with utmost honesty as well. And by the way, the French 75 group was inspired by a revolutionary group named the Weathermen in the USA in the 1960s and 70s. The Weathermen were a group composed of some rich kids who sacrificed their luxurious lives for a revolutionary cause. But they couldn't get over their upbringing completely and carried their prejudices into their politics as well. They were honest but adventurous and to a large extent self-oriented. They believed they could overthrow the US state through an armed struggle. But Their adventurous and impatient politics led them to make blunders. My question here is, why choose such a group for depicting revolution? Why not a successful guerrilla group like Che Guevara's? In fact, why choose armed struggle to depict revolution at all? There are examples of revolutionary politics in history that were not peaceful in the traditional sense of the word, like the Bolshevik Party, which led the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Bolshevik Party wasn't a parliamentary party or a party that only believed in protesting. It was a revolutionary party whose aim was to overthrow the capitalist system in Russia, and it successfully overthrew it through a socialist revolution. Armed struggle isn't the only way of overthrowing the system, but the filmmakers intentionally chose armed struggle to depict revolution and chose a group that was unsuccessful and full of immaturity. If we summarize this film in one sentence, it would be no to the extremes, yes to the peaceful and lawful moderate so-called resistance. There are two main motives behind making this film. One is to cash in on the general revolutionary and discontented mood in society, especially among Gen Z. The other is to highlight the supposed importance of peaceful liberalism in contrast to radical struggle. You might have noticed that in recent years, there's been a surge in films and OTT series with revolutionary or class conflict themes. Parasite, Squid Game, Money Heist, Don't Look Up. All of them exploring the rich versus poor dynamic. This kind of cinema doesn't just reflect the mood, it uses it, shaping it into something safe and acceptable to the ruling class. Art, especially cinema, has always been a powerful weapon, and the ruling class knows that better than anyone. They use it to channel anger into acceptable, harmless rebellion. Will they succeed? No, because no film can stop real material suffering. Jobs, poverty, inequality. These shape people's consciousness more than movies ever could. One battle after another might blur the line for a moment, but it can't stop the tide. The growing gap between rich and poor, inflation and joblessness are pushing the masses, especially Gen Z, toward radical politics. That's why we see the rise of extremes, both right and left. Not because people are stupid, but because they want change, real change, which liberal democracy doesn't offer. So this film, at its core, is a liberal cry, a plea to keep things as they are. It supports the status quo, not revolution. Even DiCaprio said in an interview, "We are proud to be part of Paul's filmography, but more than that, to be in a film that feels like a lightning rod, holding a mirror to society, to the divisive nature of where we are at, the extremism, all with satire and epic scope." It is the most entertaining, yet the most politically biased film on an epic scale. A thrilling cinematic experience, but you'll have to leave your brain at home. It doesn't fire its politics straight at your face. It tries to sneak them into your subconscious. And in the end, it fails to leave any lasting political impact. So yes, you're safe to go to the cinema for 3 hours of pure banger entertainment. Or maybe a few banger entertaining moments. And watching DiCaprio on the big screen